She's back.
I gotta get my.
Okay, I turned mine off. I didn't realize that. Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to the workshop on the transmission line. This is a brief summary of the workshop we had about 2 weeks ago. Now, this workshop was done by Transco. It's been recorded. It's on the town web page, like all the other town board meetings are. And it's also on YouTube, so you can see it in live in all its detail. There were handouts given. They will be given and put on the town's web page so that you can see the screen material that was also provided, and there were some fact sheets that were handed out. The purpose of this little short workshop is to give information relevant to some of the highlights of what was talked about at the workshop. It's not a total redo of it. It's just trying to get information out to the people. Now, we'll start off with one of the things that everybody's interested in is the schedule. And we're talking about the power lines that are behind the Clinton Alliance Church, parallel to Center Road, on the east side of town here. The ones behind Omega on the west side of town are not affected at all. And this is the project areas right there. It covers 8 miles in the town of Clinton. So it's a fairly long stretch. Now, what the plan is, and this is what they showed and presented to us, is they're going to take down the 2 separate towers that you see today that are side by side and essentially replace them with one monopole in the middle, which will contain on one side the same voltage, 145 kVA, and on the other side they're upgrading it to 345 kVA. So they're increasing the power going down, and this is what's supposed to be eliminating the grid problem in New York City. So this project now, that's what it is. And it's a lot of work because they're taking the physical towers down, the wires down, they got to replace them all. They got to drill holes into the ground with a drill, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 feet deep, concrete these monopoles, and we'll get into how high they are in a moment, into the ground, and then restring wires all the way down, and I'm sure they're using different wires than the ones that exist there today. So the overall schedule is, the decision was made in April 2019 when they were getting the contract. Between now and sort of the end of this year, Transco is putting together their detailed drawings of what the tower heights are, actually where they are, and verifying that they're not going to go outside of the existing land that they own. So in other words, we do not anticipate any eminent domain needs for them. Now, additionally, though, during this process, they're going to be having to talk to landowners along the way for the power line so that they get access points onto where the power line exists, because they're going to need trucks, heavy equipment, concrete, all kinds of stuff. And many places, if you're familiar with the power line, It's rocky and inaccessible just driving from a dirt road or a macadam road along the power line to get to these various towers as they're scattered about. There's 59 of these towers along the way, so they're going to have to make some sort of easement relations with property owners that willingly enter into these easements, probably getting some money, so they can get access to the various places where they got to put the towers in, the monopoles rather. So coming the end of this year through 2020, they're going to be doing what's called Article 7, which is the permitting process. And at that time, we will have the detailed information. And before that starts, we'll probably have another open workshop recorded on TV and available for comments from the public in the town hall, so you can further get real specific information about where they're going to be putting the towers, tower heights, access points, and any environmental issues they understand or whatever. After, in 2021 and 2023, they'll be doing the construction project. Now, some of this stuff is going to take a long time to do because we're just one segment of the total span from Albany down to Pleasant Valley. So I don't know exactly when they'll be in our town. The construction phase is predicated using primarily people outside the area. They say they're going to use local workers and stuff. It's unlikely we have the talent that is going to be able to go up the monopoles, hook up these high voltage 345 kVA lines and be careful and not get hurt. So maybe there may be hiring somebody to work a ground shovel and fill in a hole or something like that, and maybe they'll buy some local concrete, but don't look at it as being a real financial boom. Yes, they may go to the local delis and stuff and get a couple sandwiches or something like that, but that's it. Won't live here. They won't, because there's no place to live in the town for this number of people coming through. So they'll probably be Rhinebeck, Kingston, or wherever, Hudson, who knows. So we get little financial income from this project in town. We also do not get any hookup to this wire going through. Now, it'll go through and wind up in Pleasant Valley. Pleasant Valley is substation there, is owned by Con Edison. I don't know what happens at that point. They could backfeed to the Hibernia substation or some of the other substations, and we could get something from that. But we're not the area that's really electricity deficient. It's mostly Westchester County and New York City area and Suffolk County. So they're hoping by the end of 2023, it'll be in service and everything will be done, the grass will be growing, and we'll all be very, very happy. We'll see what happens. Now, as I said, the permitting process is going to allow us to get what are called intervenor funds. These funds are given to PSG, Public Service Commission, PSC rather, and they distribute them on a grant-like basis to organizations and local governments to provide technical comments and criticisms, agreements, mostly criticisms, of what these power line people are doing in the construction and everything else. And looking at several things. One, environmental issues, water, streams, ponds, special species of plants, trees, whatever. So that'll be happening. And we will fight this through the Hudson Valley Secure Energy Coalition like we did last time. We don't have very many options at this point. Supposedly, they're going to stay within the right-of-way, which was a big issue, which we've won last time. And they were not supposed to be higher than the towers. I know they're not going to be higher than the towers. Here's the tower issue. They're saying that the average height increase will be 10 feet. Now, that doesn't say it's 10 feet for every one. It could be 40 feet for one tower and 0 feet or maybe 20 less feet, so that the average comes out, if you take the two of them and come together, that a 60-foot tower would be higher, would be 70 feet average if you did the math. They don't commit to anything other than saying it's the average. So it's playing on numbers, and it's very critical. So, but we will know exactly what they all are, and then we have to complain and figure out, because what they have now is a situation that's going to cause them some grief, and they have not done the measurements because we asked them specifically during the course of the meeting. When you put 345 kVA on a tower at the edge of the property line that they own, there's a certain level of EMF, electromagnetic force, radiation value that can be there. If it is higher than that, it's considered a health hazard. The only way you can solve that health problem is reduce the voltage, which they can't do. They're stuck to 345, is they will have to raise the pole height, because the EMF falls off as a square the distance. It's strictly geometry. There's nothing else. They're not going to put shields around these wires or anything else to prevent it from coming out, because then they have other problems. So the height problem is going to be a big issue. And we're ready for it, but we can't do anything until we see the numbers, because it's site specific. Obviously, if they're on top of a hill and they go up 20 feet, makes them really, like 80 feet up in the air, becomes highly visible above the tree line. If they're in a valley and they go up 20 feet, depends if the valley is 40 feet deep, you probably never see the pole. So you got all of these things working out. So we can't do an analysis to say that this is financially stupid to do. Yet all these studies done by us and the PSC have verified that if you spend $100 to build it, you're only going to get $75 back in income. So you're losing 25%. You can't run a business that way except if you're government. So essentially what's going to happen is we, the taxpayers, we, the users of the electricity, are going to be subjugated to another tax on our bill. You won't find it to be buried, to pay the shortfall of this. And, that's the way it's going to be, because Governor Cuomo could only get it done by calling it a public policy. And public policy, we have no way of fighting that in any way. We've looked at the laws and everything else. You just can't. You can run the people out of office and hope that there's a new regime, but this process has gone so far, they've spent so much money that it's going to be hard to do that. So that's the general background of this whole thing, and I'll keep you informed. Now, I'm going to go through quickly some of the other aspects of this thing. This is an email that I'd gotten from them saying that towers mostly will be 80 feet, the current height, and 90 feet, with an average of 90 feet. Well, This is the 10-foot number that we were all talking about. Staging is going to be interesting, and they're going to have to figure out whose property they can actually stage this stuff on. Now, one of the questions we had that I hadn't asked about it is that these towers are not single poles as designed. They physically will end up being a single pole, but they will be assembled on site. So in other words, you're not going to see a 140-foot pipe or monopole come down the highway because they'll never go around our roads. They're just too long and big. So they come in pieces. Whether it's 4 pieces, 3 pieces, they wouldn't commit to that. So they're going to come in pieces. They're going to have to weld them together and then erect them. Now, they have the option, and it's been done other places, where the poles, monopoles, are assembled remotely, and they hire a helicopter, and he brings them in and sets them in the holes, and they go from there, which is better for the roads, it's better for our environment and spaces, less spaces they need to get to access. So don't know if they'll do that, but it, could be the cheapest one in the long run, even though it sounds expensive, because you can quickly put them up and have assembled some other remote place. So that's the tower stuff and the staging. They're talking about PR for the farmers. Now, if you realize, a lot of places farmers are utilizing the space under these power lines. There's an agreement between the landowner, farmer, and the Transco or Niagara Mohawk people that own the land, physically own the land, and they can do it. So they have hay fields, they have horse pastures, they have all kinds of stuff in, their property. So by taking off the 2 towers and putting 1 monopole, you're providing more land for the farmer to use for agriculture purposes. They're making that a big selling point. It's a selling point, but it's being overrated as being a big contribution to the community. The jobs I told you about, they're just going to hire some people to come from Hudson, out west, wherever. They have their own standard crews that are going to come down and build these things and hang the wires. These are not done by local people, as I say. We may have local people here doing some other works, and I'll get to them in a moment. The environment, this is where some discussion came up that people were saying, well, how much noise are you going to be making with all of this equipment, digging holes into the stone, because as you're well aware, we have a lot of stone in the communities where the power line goes, and they got to grind it, and it is going to take big augers. I mean, they're talking about drilling a hole probably 3 to 4 feet in diameter with these big machines. So it's going to be noisy. So the horse owners were saying, well, my horses get scattered. They get upset with some of these sharp noises or big noises, especially if they're not constant, like for example, if you're driving along a road and there's a horse pasture there and you have a fire truck, you try either to have the siren on earlier and the whole time through, or you don't put it on. You turn it off and you leave it off until you're far away from them so they don't get excited and jump all over the place and hurt themselves or get out or whatever else. And that was a real concern, and they said that they will meet with all the people with those kind of concerns and try to coordinate how to do it. Maybe you take your horses and put them in a van and go to a more remote place of the pastures or to another farm and keep them there for a while. they make all the noise and then you bring them back the same day or whatever. So they're aware of that kind of situation. Now, the environmental one is probably one of the ones that's going to be very interesting. They're supposed to be doing studies now, and you'll see these trucks. Letters were sent out, about 2 months ago, to all the adjacent property owners along the power line that we're talking about. And what it did was it gave the schedule of what they're doing and the kind of stuff that they'll be doing. And the kind of stuff they'll be doing is several things. One, a couple of years ago, they went through and actually defined the east and west side of the property line owned by the transmission company. They're going through again, resurveying so that they know exactly where it is. They will then go through, because it's a 345 line they're putting up, federal law 2 years ago or so said any 345 line is considered a national product to be, a national area to be protected. To be protected, they meant you got to clear cut everything from one side of the property to the other side. So you may find trees being cut down during the summer or later this fall or over the winter, who knows. Clear cutting that whole area. And when they clear cut it, they take the big logs and just stack them along the side. And they take the top stuff up to maybe 3 inches in diameter, put it in a pile, and they have this great big brush hog that comes along, and they set it right on top, and it shreds the branches. And they just leave the pile there, because that's what they did on the big 345 lines that are not being affected. They did that 2 years ago. So that's what's going to happen. So some of you people are going to wind up with what you thought was a shield or visual barrier or something to the power lines, may disappear. And you may think that they're on your property, but no, it's their property, and they will cut them down. So that's one thing they got to do by law, and they got to do that so they have better accessibility to put the poles up. The other part of it is they can go back beyond what their property line is, and they're supposed to ask permission and show you and discuss it with you. If they see a real big tree that they think is going to be a problem to them, because there are trees that are today higher than the towers are along the property lines, they can remove that tree. So be aware, be concerned, and be observant. That's all I can tell you, because I don't know which ones they are. Maybe when they go down, they may be marking some of them along the way and talking to you. I hope they do, but it's nothing that we in government here know individually, because I can't tell one tree or another as what their rules are. So I just forewarn you on it. This is a later this year thing. They are also today driving around doing test borings. That's with sort of like a well driller's drill, going down to just ascertain depth to bedrock and what kind of rock it is and stuff like that, where they anticipate putting the monopoles. These monopoles have to be put into the ground, and they got to be substantial, because we don't want the wind to blow them over. And one pole goes, it's the domino effect. A lot of them go, it means the line dies, and they got to cut it off. It could also start a fire from all of the electricity arcing to the ground. So they're going to be doing that. They're also going to be doing and taking pictures of all the environmental wetlands, sacred areas, all that kind of stuff. And this is all in preparation for them making the detailed maps so that they know what is there and can come up with a plan that preserves it and protects it for us, because they know we're very environmentalists in this area. We have Scenic Hudson and other places, Omega Institute and others that have pushed this issue in the past with us. So, and we have some of that information that we can review and see where the highlights are and see what they're doing and how they're going to do it. For example, they may have to put a pole, and I don't know if they do or don't, because I haven't walked the whole distance, all 8 miles, but they may have to put a pole in the middle of a pond or a wetland. That is going to be a tricky thing. First of all the heavy equipment sinks into the ground. How do you drill a hole in mud to find a base? So you got to put a barrier around it and everything. It becomes quite a constructional nightmare. So these are some of the issues we're going to see. They have given us phone numbers for contacts, and I'll give you that when it's for Shannon, and that'll be on the web page. I'm not going to try to bore you with trying to memorize numbers. So the other thing that they're saying, and it will occur to some extent, but it's not as big a deal as they make it out to be. They're saying that what happens is the land is assessed different than the towers and the wires, okay? And this is true and has been for years. I mean, I've fought at Niagara Mohawk and others in prior years on this assessment value. Now, the land isn't changing, so that assessed value is basically staying the same. But the towers and wires that exist today have essentially been, for the most part, depreciated. So that part of the value of the property assessment has gone down to almost zero, so it's essentially non-existent. The new towers go in at the new tower price, and they will then depreciate them, I'll say 20 years. I don't know what the exact number is, but several years. And the wires and all that other stuff. So that will then be put onto the land assessment, sort of like your house is added to your land assessment, and then you get the composite, which combines both of them. Well, that's what happens here. But unfortunately, the land assessment we do, okay, our assessor does that. But the assessment for the poles, the wires, and all of that is done by Albany Real Property, and they give us a number, and that's a number we got to use. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I've taken them to court in the past, and we've generally won if we thought they were out of line. But so we will get some additional tax dollars because of that change in value of the installed inventory. So obviously, if there's any damage to residents' properties or stuff, call them and they'll work it out and try to fix it. Whether they have obviously all kinds of insurances to cover this kind of stuff. And let's see what else. Oh yeah, we're trying to keep the fire departments informed so that they're aware of this project, because if someone falls 80 feet off of one of these towers while they're installing some insulators rather, or wires or something, they can get hurt, and we got to get to them. And it's not easy to get to them from some places where they are. So they're being kept informed on this sort of stuff. So that's it. I didn't want to spend a great deal of time, but you can see the presentation both visually and handouts on the web page. I think they're there. I'm not sure. I didn't check today because we only did it a few weeks ago. So I thank you all, and I'll keep you informed, and probably we won't have a workshop until maybe October or something like that as we start into the permitting process. So, thank you. Bye.